Something we've been trying to focus on here on the show is not just about the technology, but the strategy. What is it that can make podcasters successful? And today we have one such person. We are chatting with Adam Torres. He is co-founder and host at Mission Matters. You can learn more about him at missionmatters.com. It is a top performing podcast, and it's also a media, branding, and book publishing agency. So lots of good stuff there for our listeners today. Adam, thank you for joining me.
Hey, Matthew, man, I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I'm ready to get started. Let's do it.
Sweet. Well, let's go back to the beginning then. Adam, how did you find yourself in the podcasting space, either, working there or producing your own show or hosting your own show?
Well, I don't know about you, Matthew, but when people ask me to do things, a lot of times the first thing I want to say is no. I don't have time. I'm busy. Leave me alone. I had one such incident very specifically related to podcasting. Myself and the other co-founder here, Chirag Sagar, he's like, hey, Adam, we need to start a podcast. Now, at this time, we were solely a book publishing company, and we were doing these anthology books where we bring together a series of entrepreneurs and, publish them, get their stories out there so they could be heard. So Chirag tells me, Adam, we need to do a podcast. And I'm like, Chirag, I don't even know what is a podcast? Who cares? Like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, we need to do one. We're going to sell more books if we do this. And I'm like, what do we do? So when
was this roughly, by the way? Like, what year?
This would have been, we're going on 9 years now. So that'd be 9 years ago or so?
So 2013, 2014-ish.
Yep.
Cool.
And in November, it will be 9 years exact. So yeah, about 9 years.
Nice.
So he tells me, no, I need to do this, need to get through this podcasting. And I'm like, well, if I do it, like, I don't know how to interview people. I don't know how any of this works. So my first show took maybe like 10 minutes to launch. I just set it up like on one of these platforms really quickly. And I said, well, Chirag, we don't have anyone to interview. So you're my first victim, man. Let's do it. So that's how it all started. I like to give people that story because I want everybody to get out there to start it, but you may not even known you were going to be doing it. So this is my forcing you. Get one started because you won't regret it.
All right. So your partner said we should do a podcast. You're like, all right, we'll do it. What were some of how long did it take until you, one, found yourself excited about doing it, but then two, when did you start seeing a return on that investment?
I think my previous career, and now mind you, at this time I still was in finance, and I think my previous career kind of predisposed me for it. Like, I think anybody that's on the phone, anybody that's been in sales, anybody that's been, so after doing the first couple, I was like, wait a minute. When I started in my career in finance, I mean, when I exited, I managed a little under 200 million. So I've been working in that for maybe 14 years, just for some context. But when I exited after that, and then I start this podcast, I'm doing these interviews, and I think about my early days when I first started in finance, and I was like, this is kind of like being in a call center. I said, so this is what a podcaster does? Well, and I'll give you the reason why, Matthew. For me, I approached my calls, and my clients were very different. It was very conversational. I really enjoyed learning about their businesses. I learned learning about what they did. And if you think about it, my calls were recorded and somebody was listening to it, but it just wasn't an audience. It was my manager. Because your manager listens to your calls for call quality. So I already had that kind of like audience thing in my head. And so when I jumped into the podcasting side, I was like, man, okay, so a podcaster is an overglorified call center employee in finance. That was my initial thought. Obviously, that's how I approached it in the beginning. And I think because I did that, there was no it just kind of was natural to me, and people were listening to the conversations. And just for context, and I say this again for the newbies out there, my first 300 episodes were not edited. I don't even know if I did an intro. I don't know if I did an outro. It was just straight content, straight and not unedited upload. And we built an audience from that. So I did over 300 episodes very quickly. I got better over time, or maybe I'm still getting better, of course. But that was it. So we had an immediate uptick in everything, like whether it was book sales, whether it was reach, whether it was social media, whether it was everything had an uptick for us pretty immediately. And those 300 episodes, I probably did those in maybe 2 months. So we were busy and had demand like really quickly to be on the show.
Wow.
Yeah.
What would you say was a primary driver of the success? Was it the content, the way you marketed it, the fact that you were talking to so many people? Like, what do you think it was that made this product so useful for you in the beginning?
I won't say the marketing, because we didn't have a website. We didn't have a website. We didn't have a newsletter. We didn't have anything. So like, this is the real. I'm giving you the real, Matthew, because people look at it. You Google me, you go on my Instagram, Ask Adam Torres. You'll see all this polished stuff now that our marketing team and everybody makes sure. That's one story. But we didn't even have a website in the beginning. So we had over 300 episodes, no website, no nothing, no newsletter, nothing. What we had is, I think if I had to say there was one thing, and I know some of the people listening, like, they're like, what? This is the answer this guy gives me. Authenticity. I was authentic. I would say on the show, I don't know what I'm doing, and I can't believe this person's coming on the show, but thank you for being my guest. You're like the 5th guest in, and I still don't know how to do this, but I appreciate you. Like, I would just tell the truth. So if there's one thing that I know that I did, and I still do, by the way, in my opinion, is I have the ability to tell the person that's being interviewed where I'm at, and also for the audience to feel like they're on that journey with me. And now, I'll give you just one quick thing, because it was a huge win this week, Matthew. And I'll be quiet, let you ask another question. But I'm just coming back from like fast forwarding 9 years in this business. Politics aside, whatever. This is not getting into politics, but starting from as terrible as I just came back from Miami. We were covering the FII Priority event out there. And just to give you an idea of what that was, the president did the opening keynote. Elon Musk was there, the CEO of TikTok, of Eric Schmidt from Google, like all of the top CEOs and individuals in the world were there for big companies. A bunch of individuals from Saudi Arabia, a lot of His Excellencies and His Majesties were there. And that started from the worst podcaster ever, I would say. So 9 years later, so if you have a dream of doing something, you want to be a podcaster out there, man, or you want to see how far you could take it, put in the work. But I just had to give you that. Like, it's just, you can do something with this. It matters.
You know, you were talking about, being brutally honest. And I think what that translates to for a lot of people is authenticity. Right. And like, there's that great scene in the Howard Stern movie where he goes from, why did I just lie about this commercial, to now just being brutally honest with this audience, just talking about what's really going on with his life. And that's what made him so attractive. And it sounds like that same thing is what makes you so attractive to not just the audience, but also the guests. You've spoken to 6,000 plus people. And I imagine you've retained a lot of those relationships, and those have been a big part of building on your success.
Mm. And what that does too, and when you say relationships, what it does, and this is just another, man, it's been a great week for us. And what I mean by that is specifically for, I'm human. Everybody listening to this ideally is human, except for the AI. But other than that, that's listening to this to answer somebody's question. Other than that, we're all I cover that. It's one of the most important conferences in the world, just period. Like Davos and many of the others. I mean, it's top of the top when it comes to where to be in the type of content that comes out there. I'm really proud to say that I built enough trust with the executives there and some of the individuals there to where now they come to me to break stories. And I've done multiple for them where I'm the first person. Now, mind you, this is one of the most important, organizations in the world, and they can go to CNBC, they can go to Bloomberg, they can go to Yahoo, they can go to anybody. But the reason why I get some of these interviews first is because of the trust, and the person behind the mic does matter. And I'm not saying I'm this great talent. That's not what I mean by that. But the trust and the relationships you build when you do interviews with people, and if you make that connection with them, it does matter. And even down the line, I've had some people that I've interviewed, 2, 3, 4 times over the course of the last 9 years. And just to give you an idea of 2 of the studies that I just recently broke for them in terms of doing some interviews, one was on was on how to prevent gun violence, so very polarizing issue. So the person that Emily that trusted us with that interview was the executive over there that headed the study, and she wanted to be with somebody, on an interview that she trusted or that she knew, and it was that type of interview. Another one that I just recently did for them was for another individual named John, and it was about talking about philanthropy, the future of philanthropy, and how to get involved. And it related a lot to like major issues like climate change and other issues that can really be polarizing in our country and otherwise. So like trust, those relationships that you mentioned over time, the quality of your platform, and I don't mean the quality of like how good your marketing is, how fancy it is, how good your social media clips. I mean the content. Who are you interviewing? What kind of conversations are you having? Are you doing things that are still authentic like you were doing in year 1 and year 9? So how do you maintain that thread of authenticity through all of your body of work so that you build the trust, not just with your guests who are important people, but also your audience who you want to be listening, that can over time trust you and trust your voice? Not because, depending on your show, by the way, I put myself in the broadcaster space. So what I mean by that, for anybody that's listening that kind of doesn't know the differentiator, I'm more of a broadcaster. My goal isn't to be an influencer giving my opinion on every subject. I come more so from the broadcasting school where I want to get the story out. I want people to be able to hear both sides of the story. I'm not nothing against influencers, but I'm not going to talk for 5 minutes on my opinion on XYZ before leading into a question. I'm going to get to the question. Like, it's a little bit different of a slant.
So interestingly enough, you mentioned a couple of different topics that you're right are very polarizing, and you mentioned certain people's names that are very polarizing, and not necessarily one side or the other, right? A little bit over here, a little bit over here, a little bit over here. So I imagine that you probably run into plenty of audience and commenters and followers who get upset over talking, doing any of these things that might seem polarizing to one side or the other. How do you reconcile that, right? Like, how do you work through that? What do you do when you do a topic on global warming and half your audience says it's a fake? What are you doing? Stop doing that. And then you do something on, Elon Musk and his stuff, and everyone's like, he's an oligarch, he's a tyrant. Like, why would you even talk about him? Like, how do you, keep your audience happy, or what do you think about when you start to see those kinds of polarized reactions?
Well, the first thing I like to do is I like to bring out the human element. And I'll tell you what I mean by that. Like, my goal is, when we think about even a word like Elon Musk, which I haven't had the privilege of interviewing him, one day maybe, but somebody like that, when the higher the level the person is and the more known they are in the media, we don't actually look at them as people usually. They're figureheads. They're figures. There's people. They're cartoon characters. Some people look at me as a cartoon character. Like right now, I don't, because I'm being interviewed. I don't have on my normal red tie and my normal suit and my American flag pin. I go to conferences sometimes and like people don't recognize me and they don't want to take a picture with me until I put on that stuff. Like, they don't, it's because I'm a character. It's like a cartoon character. So first thing I want to do is I want to bring, like most people, I believe, in all the 6,000 plus interviews I've done, they have they didn't start from a standpoint of they want to be polarizing or they want to hurt. And many of them don't want to hurt, even if you think like they're not trying to hurt people. They're trying to do the best they can. And they're from their standpoint, they are doing, what they feel is right many times, right? There's going to be the outliers. But I want to bring out some type of human element. So I'll give you just one quick example. I'm interviewing specifically for the Milken Institute, their chief economist, and I'm at their global conference in Beverly Hills. And a normal interview, and no disrespect to any of the big companies, and I say big, we're only a little over 30, but we punch above our weight. I like to say, like that Mike Tyson's punch out from back in the day. I'll try to punch above my weight, but it's us, it's Yahoo's there, Bloomberg's there, right? All the top ones. These companies have thousands of employees. And so I'm interviewing the chief economist there, and they may ask him a question, okay, which is the obvious. Okay, so what do you think is going to happen with inflation? What do you think is going to happen in the next quarter? What do you think is going to happen with corporate earnings? What do you think? Okay, that's good. For me, the first question I asked him was, so how did you originally get involved with the Milken Conference? Like, how did that come about? How did you meet Michael Milken in the first place? No, I know, no offense to anybody else there. That's not necessarily their job or the type of content they're trying to get, but nobody at Bloomberg asked him that. They don't care. It's a little bit different. So, and listen to the response I got. He says, and this is gold. This is the gold of it all. He tells me this story about how when he first learned of / met Michael Milken, what it was when he was trying to raise some money for this little old company that nobody thought would ever work. Like, come on, 24-hour news. That's insane. Why would anybody ever fund CNN? So he believed in that as his chief economist, which is what he is now, by the way. What his title was then, back then, or where he worked for, I don't know. But that's when he first learned about his work. And he's like, man, you know what? I'm behind this guy. Like, I'm an advocate. I understand what he's doing. He's a visionary. He sees things a little bit differently than others. And this is one of those, who knows how many PhDs, how many whatever, one of those people, like smartest people in the world kind of person, right? So I brought out the human element of him before even talking about inflation or anything else like that. I can still do the other side of it, but I want the human element too, because I feel like when people can connect with each other and understand on some level that we're all human, it makes people at least a little bit more receptive, just even to listen, just even to actually listen before their guard is just like, whoop, it's up.
You know, I have said it before on the show and in other places. I couldn't agree with that more. I remember when I was working in news and we would be interviewing people all the time and interviewing people for the left and for the right and people I liked, people I disliked, people I agreed with, whatever it was. But anytime we had somebody who came into studio and we had a chance to interview them, I just remember if they were at all kind, if they just treated all of us with a little bit of respect, a little bit of dignity,
a sliver,
right? Just a hair, right? Just for them to come in and, you know, introduce themselves and ask about us, right? Like immediately my thoughts on them change to, I could disagree with you, but I like you. And it's amazing how easy that is to do. And yet it seems like it is, when it comes to the public persona, right, we immediately jump to dehumanizing everybody. And I think if we all spent a little bit more time humanizing, we could disagree without getting so vicious and visceral and nasty. And you know, maybe we'd be in a better place than we are today. But I don't think we're going to solve the world's problems right now.
I mean, that's the process, though, right? It's the, you know, the rub, if you will. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now, having done more than 6,000 interviews, having done, you know, great work, having all these accomplishments, right? Like going places in your life that you never thought you were going to go to as a result of this podcast, what would you say to someone just starting out, someone maybe, you know, maybe 15, 20 episodes in, not moving the needle? Like, what is your default advice to someone saying, man, Adam, how do I get better at my podcasting? Or how do I get my podcast to be more successful?
Yeah. So I'll give you some advice that was when I was probably like maybe 300, 400 episodes in, and I was at that place where I'm like, man, is this working? Does it even matter? Like my numbers are kind of the same. Is it? And I met with this gentleman who he's an old school Hollywood guy. I'm located in LA and he's old school. Like he was a lead writer on shows like Hill Street Blues and like all these classic shows. Like he was a writer for a long, long time. So he's worked with huge stars, huge talent in his career. And I was like, man, let's go have coffee. Like I'm just in my head about this creatively and this and that, all these things. So I was kind of struggling just mentally. You know, it's all just between my ears. Nobody else knows that this is going on with me. And I meet with him and he says, okay, Adam, so what's going on? So I tell him how I'm feeling, everything else. And he's like, all right. He said, how long ago did you start? It was like whatever the amount of time was, maybe 3-6 months before. And I'm already feeling this like, oh, what's going on? And he says, well, are you better now than when you started 6 months ago or whatever the amount of time was? And I'm like, yeah. He said, are you better now than you were a week ago? I said, yeah. He said, do you think you're going to be better like next week than you are today in your interviews or your process? I said, yeah. And then he said, what about in a year? Are you going to be better? I was like, yeah. He's like, how about in 5 years? I said, yeah. I said, what about 10 years? You're going to be better then? He said, yeah. He says, well, present day Adam doesn't have the right to judge the work of future Adam. So just keep recording.
Interesting. Present day Adam doesn't have the right to judge future Adam.
Just keep recording. Just keep working at your craft. You're going to be better. So why? You don't even know how good you're going to be. Just keep recording.
Have you ever come across a scenario or situation where you were doing something and you're like, this doesn't work? And at what point do you make that call? Because there's what you said, believing in yourself and, you know, not knowing what the future holds, and see where this can take you. But there's also an investment of time and energy and resources, and sometimes people are doing something and they're spinning their wheels, and right, the definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different outcome. Like, is there something there that makes you say to yourself, you know what, that's not working, let's focus our energy somewhere else or try something different, as opposed to just keep going?
Well, I want to just maybe slightly paraphrase what you mentioned. I'm not actually coming from so my background's finance. So the way that you position that question is kind of more like on the inspirational side of things. For me, though, I'm more on the technical side. So what I mean by that is I mean the compound, let's just call it interest, or the compound return of my labor. Like, so when I think about like interviews, I look at quantity, I look at trying to make each one better, but my belief isn't like from the inspirational side or like what could happen. It's more so that I'm like Michael Jordan doing free throws. If I'm doing 1,000 free throws a day, guess what? My percentage in free throws I'm gonna be making more shots. Like, period. It doesn't matter. If I'm doing more interviews, if I'm practicing my craft over time, I'm going to get better because I can't not get better as long as I'm there and I'm present during the interview. So that's just one slight adjustment for the way I understood the way you position. I'm actually looking at quantity. I'm tracking those metrics. I'm looking at also the response from the guests. I'm also looking at my numbers in terms of like growth over time. So I do have those components, but the other part of that is to continue to answer your question is, I study. I take it. This is very different for me. So when I was in finance, to give you an example, I had my Series 6, my Series 7, my Series 63, my CFP. I probably consumed maybe 15,000 pieces of content in my tenure in order to get all those licenses and in order to have the skills to be able to manage hundreds of millions of dollars. I take this business that serious. So what I mean by that is I've read over 100 books minimum on entertainment. So when I started down this path, I would say something that's slightly different from myself. Once I knew, by the way, the early days when I was just recording those first 300 or whatever episodes, that was a crap show, whatever. Like, that was just like, let's record, let's see what happens. That was not me taking this as a craft. Once I had that little silver lining of, or that silver, like whatever it was, like, this thing looks like it's working. People are listening. What the heck's happening? Once I knew that this was a thing or even a profession, which I didn't know when I first did it, I just did it because, as I mentioned, Shirag said to do it. Then I started going back and studying the greats. So the good thing about entertainment and in general for this business is everybody has a biography. I went back, I read all the Johnny Carson biographies out there. I read the David Letterman ones. I read the Jay Leno ones. I read the Oprah books. I read all of Howard Stern's books. I read all of like Howard Stern has these great books where he has his interviews transcribed. I learned what they said, and I'll just give you one quick excerpt from one of them that I'll paraphrase. In one of his books, he talks about his early days in radio and how amazing it was and how important that period of time when he was working at those crappy small stations were, because at that point he was trying to find his voice so that he would be worth a larger audience listening to. So I go back and I study the Red Skelton days, the Bob Hope days, like all of that, how this entertainment business even came to be. So I know that's a long answer to your question, but what it means to me though is when I say like, is something not working, it's like on what time period? How, like, again, finance, am I looking at the bar chart like really close to where I'm saying it didn't work on this interview? But when you like pull back and you look at the entire Dow Jones average over the last 100 years or whatever, it's going up. So for me, I don't really get caught in the one thing that's doing, because if not, it'll drive me crazy, man. I'm going to do 40 interviews this week. I do 1,500 to 2,000 interviews this year. It will literally drive me crazy if I reassess every interview. But when I look back at the chart from further away, it's like, man, we're going up. Just the current present day Adam has no right to judge based on the work I'm doing, by the way, not just leaving it up to chance. I'm still reading books. I'm still studying my craft. I'm considering, and maybe I should say this here, actually. I'm going to say this here. First time I've ever said it. I'm enrolling in a comedy class in Las Vegas because I want to put together 5 minutes of comedy. I've never done comedy in my life. I am absolutely terrified, Matthew. Even saying this is the first time I've said it publicly. My hands are getting palmy and sweaty just thinking about it. I got a comedy coach and I'm already freaking out. But I push myself, and I just know that's another skill set. It's another skill set to obtain. So that's my process overall to take it.
Love that. I mean, best of luck on the comedy stuff.
I'm scared, man. I don't want to, and I don't think I'm going to be a stand-up comedian. Like, that's not the goal, but I want to be a better host. I want to be a better host. I know that there's things I can learn about comedy, about delivery, about timing that I don't know, that aren't intuitive, that information's out there and it's learnable. It's there.
I would also encourage then you check out an improv class. Improv is obviously in the same realm as comedy, but it's a different skill set. And I've heard lots of people say that improv classes or lessons have really helped them when it comes to interviewing media and things like that.
I will take your advice. That sounds amazing, and that'll be the next one. And we might have to do a repeat episode in the future when these are done. I'm gonna be like, Matthew, I did that shit. You bring me back on the show. We're talking about this. What'd you sign me up for, man?
Well, when you come out to the Helium Comedy Club in Philly, I'll be sitting in the first row checking it out. As a reminder, we are chatting with Adam Torres, co-founder and host at missionmatters.com. Great podcast with thousands and thousands of interviews and lots of other resources that you can check out. Adam, before we let you go, a few questions we always like to ask everybody. So since you've been putting out so much content, my question is there anything in podcasting that you would like to see improved, whether it's from producing, distribution, or even from the consumption side? Like, is there just something you're like, God, I wish podcasting did this or did this better?
I think one of the good things that is coming out, and I want to see more and more of it. I do want to give a shout out to Podmatch, that they're the ones that united us together. I'm really hopeful that there's more communities like Podmatch that come together, because ultimately the more guests and hosts that can get united, like as many interviews as I've done, I'm a drop in the bucket, man. It does not matter. There's such demand. My mission and my goal and my hope is to inspire others to get out there and to share their story. Like, don't listen to my show. Don't do anything. It's okay. Go create your own show. Like, go do your own interviews. Go on your own journey, because, you're part of other people's legacy. Like, it's a beautiful thing.
Love it. Any tech on your wish list, whether hardware, software, something that is out there that you just haven't purchased, or something you're like, man, I need somebody to make this for me?
Yeah. I'll say that AI has been killing it lately. The social media clips and some of the things that are happening. I'm excited for whenever this happens, by the way. On my wish list is the next version of like social media clips. They're getting really good. They're getting really good at like picking out the potential virality of like an episode or a clip or the high moments. I'm excited to see like the next version of whenever those clips get even better. Like, I want to see like the social media, the AI and all the things that are out there. You can see them getting better and better, but as they learn and they get better, I'm excited to see the next version of whatever social media software out there is going to be able to pull and pick. There may be like 85% correct and good at this point. I can't wait till they're at like 95 or 100. And you're like, man, that was amazing.
I think you're just saying that to make up for what you said earlier about AI in the interview.
I am, man. Listening. I'm like, I know they're listening. And by the way, I love Facebook too. Just in case Mark's listening, I love some Facebook. Go on that platform and click on
look at that.
Ad.
I just got a Facebook ad for Adam Torres on my, on my phone. Lastly, do you have a favorite podcast or two that you must listen to? You will not let an episode go by, or, you'll stop what you're doing to check out when they drop a new episode?
You mean other than yours?
Of course, other than mine, right? That goes without saying.
Other than yours? Oh, come on, man. I think one of them that I've been listening to quite a bit right now is, which is funny, it's more of a sports thing, but the one with Cameron and Mace. Like, I like their podcast. They crack me up. What is it? It Is What It Is. I think that's the name of it. It just comes up. The clips come up. It's, again, that's not business. It's not anything else. They talk about sports and hip hop culture and other things like that. So it's a little bit different, but they crack me up, man. And half of the thing, what I get inspiration from that show from is they laugh a lot. Those two laugh and they laugh and they laugh, and it makes me laugh more on my show, and to remember just to be loose, even with other like harder, like let's just say issues and things, like even some of those like really serious topics that we've covered. I still try to and find a way to make sure that we laugh and that we can make light. And that's because we're all going through this thing called the human condition together. And I feel like laughter can help you get through, pain. It can help you get through a lot of other emotions. So I love their show because even when they're dealing with like some not so fun stuff, they're cracking up. And that's what that's how I was raised. It's like, man, there's a lot of pain. Let's laugh at it. It's okay.
Laughter is the best medicine, as they say. Once again, we have been chatting with Adam Torres, co-founder and host at Mission Matters. You can learn more about them at missionmatters.com. Follow Adam on all the social media networks. Ask Adam Torres, and we'll have links to all those places as well, so you can easily find it. Adam, this has been a pleasure. Can't wait to chat with you again and see where this life takes you next.
Can't wait to do this improv class, man. You put it on my list now. Thank you for more work coming on the show, Matthew. Thank you.